listening to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington. Joining me, as always, Mr. Kevin Durso. Kevin, we'll get right back to you in just a second. We have a lot of stuff to get into on today's show. If you're watching on our YouTube channel, you know it's a little bit of a funky setup today. I got a little bit of a shaky cam. I'm holding my mic like I'm Paul Bissonnette. But we're here. We're going to put together a good hockey show for you. We got in a little bit of an emergency pod situation going on. Before we dive into everything, follow us on all our socials at YWT Podcast. Kevin is at Kevin_Durso. Everywhere except for Blue Sky, where it's just at Kevin Durso. Make sure you find us everywhere you find your podcast, including sportstalkphilly.com. So we are going to start with the biggest news of the day.
The whole reason we're doing this.
No. The biggest news of the day, right off the top here. You might be wondering, hey, why is this show coming out on a Friday? Weren't you guys supposed to have a show Monday? Weren't you guys supposed to have a show last Monday? Well, the answer is that Kevin Durso is a father. Congratulations, buddy. How's everything going?
It's going well.
Everybody's happy, healthy, good?
Everybody's good. Yeah. I mean, of course, like you deal with the little things along the way, but overall health is good. Everybody's doing well, adjusting. And it is a big adjustment, obviously. I guess to my credit, still haven't technically missed a game in the, from a writing standpoint. Some of them were writing themselves basically over the last little bit. So it's not like it's crazy.
When the team gives up 7 goals a couple different times, it makes it kind of.
No, it was.
We'll dive into that later.
First of all, certainly an experience that I almost can't put it into words what it's like to be there for something like that, to literally be in the room when your child is born. Definitely enjoying having her here. It's 3 weeks earlier than expected, but don't make plans with anything like that. So, and so that's the whole thing. Like I was coming up on, and then you can imagine how long and tiring, we didn't get to do a show. We did a show after what was it, either game 4 or 5 of the homestand? I think it was 4.
Like that. Yeah.
Right. With the idea that, they could lose out. And it turns out they actually won a game. And then I was fully expecting the loss in the next one, which would have capped off what was it? They ended up with legitimately a 1-6-0 homestand.
Yeah, there's a chance that one win there is the last win of the season.
Well, obviously not.
Well,
anymore,
not quite, but pretty close. It seemed like it for a while.
Right. Sure. Anyway, but what I'm getting is that, so you can imagine what kind of schedule I'm on when there's a 7-game homestand, and it's quite literally like every other day with a back-to-back thrown in on top of it. So it was like, what was that? I think it was 7 games in 12 days.
12, I think, yeah.
So I was on to day 12, game 7, and instead of going to the game, I was in the hospital that morning, bright and early that morning, for that matter. So it was, So that was long because we went to the hospital Saturday morning. She didn't get here until Sunday morning. Basically saw an entire game before she was even born, saw another game from the hospital after the fact. I cracked the joke when you guys shared, obviously we shared it on socials, cracked the joke that I was watching Ivan Fedotov in goal against Tampa on that Monday night. My daughter is a day old at this point. My daughter measured out at 19 inches at birth. And here's a 6'7" goaltender, which you try to compare the two things. It's there's a large gap. So it's
fit in his blocker or in his glove.
No. She's tiny. So fit in his blocker. No kidding. But I've been enjoying it, and like yesterday was weird, not because of like all the stuff that like we're gonna get into, obviously, but there was a home game. I didn't go. It was, as I've talked about it with my wife, with everybody else, and like my family to a degree, to kind of make sure everything's ironed out before I do go back. My plan, which still is, to go to the Saturday game against Buffalo. That was the return date for me. And I don't know that I'm going to be at every single one of these games from here on out, but it's going to be close enough. Like I can probably I was looking at least 3 of the last 4 based off of that, and only missing 2 in the process. Like the road trip was pretty well timed for this, so, so now I get the chance to go back, but it was weird watching a home game. Like,
and obviously all of us here at You Would Think wish you, your wife, your daughter all the best. It seems like you guys are doing pretty well. But I will say, though, you mentioned your daughter was 3 weeks early. And that works out really well because then she got to experience a week and a half of the John Tortorella era.
No wins.
The John Tortorella era.
Right.
So let's dive into this here because obviously I was making a little bit of a joke. The big news, obviously, here at the show is Kevin and his new child, him entering fatherhood, and hopefully he doesn't abandon me like the last host did. But we'll get there.
Shots fired.
But the other big news, the reason that we're doing an emergency podcast today, is that John Tortorella has been relieved of his duties as the Philadelphia Flyers head coach. And it was definitively phrased as such by Danny Briere. This was not a resignation. This was not a stepping down. This is not a retirement. This was a dismissal.
I wonder, so for what it's worth, by the way, I wonder if they got that statement out as quickly as they did. Like, okay, obviously it started to surface a little bit that this was possible.
Well, yeah, but all the rumors at first said Tortorella stepping down.
Well, no. The very first report that was out, which was Anthony DeMarco, by the way, was Tortorella's, which was John Tortorella out. Okay, that can be translated in a bunch of different ways, whether it's could he step down? Sure. But that also sounds like he's out, fired, right? Okay. You take that for what it's worth. As I think some of the big national guys like Elliot Friedman had stepping down, I think they got that statement out much faster at that point because they needed to get on top of, no, this is how we are phrasing it. Because some, even from the station, I was getting a message like, oh, it says he's stepping down, which wouldn't have necessarily surprised me per se, but you need to be accurate with the wording of those things because it kind of determines where that comes into play, like where the mindset was to do it. So it, that to be honest with you, it's how I write my story. Based on what you say as a team in your release, that's how I've got to write the story. If you say he resigned, which probably, by the way, would have included a statement from him on why it happened, or at least a press conference. I bet you he would have done the morning skate press conference and said something himself of this is why I'm doing it. But
absolutely he would have. And
right,
instead you get nothing. It sounds like they turned his security card off and wouldn't let him in the building.
Well, I think they let him get his stuff.
Well,
but like,
you know what I mean, though. It
but
seems as though he was
and I'll get into
out by whoever. Like,
well, and I'll get into something with that a little bit because I don't remember if I texted you guys or if it was a different group that I texted, but he just did, and they showed it over the course of, I think it was the first 4 games of the road trip, maybe is what it was. I don't remember completely how they did it. It was over the road trip. They did a 4-part interview on NBC Sports Philly with Tortorella. Ashlyn Sullivan sat down with him. They broke it up into 4 parts. There was all these questions. One of them was about his future, which it's a question. We were talking about this last year.
About this with John Tortorella since he got hired, basically.
Well, yeah, but there was a difference between, like, to be honest with you, the first season when they got to about this point in the schedule, no less, and they're out of it, and he goes, all right, my assistants are doing the job. I'm going upstairs to sit with Danny and evaluate. Right? Like, that almost feels like 5 years ago, the way that this has progressed. It feels that long ago that you almost don't remember it because you go back to I think everybody just keeps going back to forget about the year 1. It's the year 2 to year 3 connection. Last year, you were in a playoff spot at this point. Now you're not. And it's not that part's unexpected. It's, man, you really look bad. Look at the way, like you're having a month of March that's, whoo boy, you really don't, like, it takes a special group to be that bad in a month, right? So you go to that. But we've been asking that question kind of since he did that in the first season, right? Oh, he watched some games from upstairs. Now he coaches the second year. He's not going to go upstairs because they're still in the race right up to the last game of the season. So he's coaching. And this year so far, he had been coaching all the way through. It wasn't like he ever took games off and said, I'm going to sit upstairs tonight. He was doing the job per se. But that was always
for the record, to give him credit, he was still doing stuff upstairs. He wasn't taking the night off when he went to the press box. Like,
no. I know that, but what I'm saying is that he was still doing what they hired him to do.
Right. He was still the bench boss. Right.
Right. Like, if there was a transition to front office in mind, he wasn't playing that card yet of, we're far enough past at this point. They don't need me on the bench. Let's let Bradshaw or Rocky Thompson or Darrell Williams coach a game here and there, and I'll go sit with my general manager, and we can have more conversations in game, right?
Yeah.
He didn't do that.
So he talk about that a little bit. Yeah, go ahead.
So he didn't do that. So the speculation was always that, like, you know, but from that very first year, the speculation always kind of was that that's what he wanted to do after he was done coaching, whenever that may be. But in the interview that he would have, like, they had that, and it's not the first time I've heard him say something like this on something. He kind of says stuff like, or his statement when it comes to his future was, I'm going to coach the team the best way I can coach the team until my general manager tells me get out. Like, it's in his hands. If they don't like the job I'm doing, tell me to get out and I'll walk. And there's almost an element to it that sounds like a threat. Like, are you willing and daring enough to tell me to get the hell out? And that's part of where I start this, is that I give Danny Briere credit for making his own decision based off of something, to not sit there and be like, you have as big or possibly even bigger a voice than the president of hockey ops and the general manager of the team, to then say, okay, you want me to tell you when it's over? It's over. Get out. And he did.
Okay. So I want to talk about that.
Yeah.
Because 3 years ago, Danny Briere comes in, Chuck Fletcher's out, all this stuff. It is presented to us, the fans, as a group of 5. It's Dan Hilferty, Val Camillo, Keith Jones, Danny Briere, John Tortorella. And we were told that 5 is working as a group. They are all together. They are all moving in the same direction. They are all have the same plan in mind, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, that lasted for about 2 months.
And Val Camillo left fairly quickly, right? So then we're down to 4.
Which, listen, and this is not inside information on that one at all, but I'm going to tell you what kind of comes from that. I think that was shedding the Dave Scott weight.
Okay. That
was somebody who was still connected to the previous side, that from a business standpoint, that was, we can't have, like, I think Dan Hilferty has a lot to do with that.
Totally. And that's fair. Since then, since Val Camillo left, right? So we're presented this team of 5. Val Camillo leaves after a couple of months.
Now it's 4, and it's been the same 4.
Now it's 4, but not too long after that, I think Dan Hilferty is still involved on the day-to-day basis. I think he is still heavily invested in the team, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Definitely. He's still there too often.
Totally. But from the public-facing perspective, he's kind of drifted out of it a little bit, and we were left with.
By the way, I want to make clear, based on what I just said, he's still there too often. I'm not saying that as a negative, like we used to with certain people. Like, he's still around way more often than we ever saw the previous guy. So
he's elbow deep in a good way.
He is involved. He still is trying to do what his role is, of course.
But from a public perspective, we were kind of left with a triumvirate. You got Jones, you got Briere, you got Tortorella.
And I think the reason you come back to that, honestly, to start with, is with all, Dan Hilferty is great for, like, trying to repair the businessy side of things. But he's not putting together a hockey team. Right. He's not evaluating players, putting together a hockey team.
Right. I certainly hope he's not calling Danny and Keith and suggesting trades and free agents. And I don't
know the only suggestion I hope he's making is based off of their own suggestions. If it's time to open up the checkbook.
Of course, but you know what I mean. I'm talking specific,
Sure. Oh, of course.
Over management. But regardless, so we're left with these 3.
Yes.
Sometime over those last 2.5 years, John Tortorella got taken off that team. Like, at some point, the line was drawn between the team and the front office. And that line was drawn between Danny Briere and John Tortorella. Like, John Tortorella was no longer part of the group in that same way.
Right.
And I don't know if that is Jones and Briere coming in and evaluating Torts for a year and going, nah, maybe he shouldn't have long-term roster type input. Maybe they just decided they wanted to run their own ship and kind of run it a little more typically to every other hockey team, where you have your general manager and your president doing stuff, and then your coach coaches the team.
Sure. Well, because
that's kind of how it's aged to me.
Well, it's a unique power dynamic because the coach was already here when you made the change of early. Like, I actually said something on the station yesterday when I did a spot, obviously in light of the news, that I think actually tell me if you agree or not, because this is at least kind of my take on it. I think you owe John Tortorella for getting Chuck Fletcher out, because he kind of saw through the crap and was like, where's this guy? Well, yeah. remember the kind of, there was, if you need to line up in the message, the coach in the first year, which John Tortorella is perfectly willing to go to these places in year one, because he feels like he's obviously got time, I guess, to sit there and say, well, we're not even remotely close. And the general manager told you 15 minutes later, we're 5 points out of a playoff spot, guys. And you're looking at the two sides, and who are you going to point to say, well, you're right? The coach, because the coach told you we don't have enough talent. We're not as good as these teams, and everybody who has a set of eyes can see it. So you go. So I think that actually, in a way, by the end of that first year, when Chuck Fletcher was actually let go, I think you owe John Tortorella a little bit for speeding that process up, because that's where they were. It was, I brought it, I wrote my typical, and I think I actually, maybe it's the benefit of having a little more time on my hands with, even though I'm trying to do dad duty at the same time, I do get hey, listen, kid's down for a nap, you take advantage of everything you can get. You know what I mean? I actually probably had time at that point, based on how early it was, to get kind of that reactionary thing. Everything happened early. Let's be clear. Also, it's 9 a.m. They're putting out there that he's let go. Okay, fine.
Not early too.
Right. So, don't get me wrong. Of course, right away, I threw a story together, ran out the door to go to an appointment for my daughter, and then got back and was like, all right, I'm spending lunchtime. She's asleep. I'm working. And got that done quick. So I had my kind of, instead of it being the day after reactionary, it was kind of 4 or 5 hours after reactionary. And the headline of it that I wrote was, the all-in coach wasn't all in on the rebuild. But you think, but here's why. Think about why he was hired in the first place. The reason he was brought in was, it's kind of a two-parter. One, you really, it was what had just happened 3 months, 3 months before? Yeah, I guess it was about 3 months before they hired him. You traded Claude Giroux. Now you're a franchise without a face. So you bring him in to immediately be the face of a franchise that doesn't have one, but also to try to maximize a team that was still more on the veteran side at the time. And for what purpose? Chuck Fletcher knew his job wasn't super secure, so I probably should get a guy in who has a pedigree of maximizing limited talent and making a success story out of it, because it possibly is going to save my job. And ultimately it didn't, because, and that's the hardest part I have with people see stuff like this as a failure of certain, and I'm generalizing it, meaning you fire a general manager, you fire a coach, you make a change in some sort of way, it looks like failure. And people are already ready to take this move and say, well, sorry, Keith Jones, Danny Briere, you haven't done your job either. We're not trusting that part of it either. And I can't go there when John Tortorella was still hired in the aggressive retool era, and then literal hours after the general manager who was the general manager when he was hired gets fired, and the eventual future general manager takes over in the interim, literally comes forward and uses the word that the other guy didn't. Well, rebuild.
Yep. Well, and beyond that first season, John Tortorella got 31 wins out of that Flyers team. How many games does that roster win without him? 24?
Here's 26?
The thing. It's not 31. I'll tell you that much.
No. The reason I'm laughing, it's definitely not 31. The reason I'm laughing is because it's almost the same question as any other year. Okay, so they're at what? 31 wins in the first year. They had 38 wins last year, and they are now at 29 this year.
29 with him.
Well, no, 28 with him. It should be. They won their 29th on Thursday night. They're
okay. Then Hockey Reference is off, because Hockey Reference has him at 29 wins this year. So
I think they were so shell shocked by it they haven't updated it yet to give Bradshaw the 1-0-0 record, which by the way, side note, and we'll talk more about Bradshaw in a little bit, but good for him, by the way. Like,
absolutely phenomenal for him to get a chance.
Well, because if you heard him talk after the game, he kind of made it sound like, I'm just going to enjoy the last 9, and I don't, whatever happens. I'm not looking for anything. But anyway,
we'll talk about potential future coaches a little later on. But I'm really glad the Phantoms are in the playoff race, so they didn't interim Lappy.
Well, and that'll come up later too. But anyway, go ahead.
Back to John Tortorella.
I wanted to answer your question because you were saying it was 31 in year 1, 38 in year 2, and now 28 under Tortorella.
Sure.
I'm not trying to. I'm not grasping.
I assume they still played his system. He can get credit.
No. It's not. It has nothing to do with whether or not. Let's go back to kind of the one thing that has been talked about most besides the coaching thing.
Okay.
How many? Like, you're sitting here saying, how many wins do they have? They got 31 in year 1. How many do they really have if John Tortorella is not the coach? Right. How many do they also have if Carter Hart's not your goaltender?
Fair enough.
Right. Well, and that goes, but then that goes to year 2. Wow, you won 38 games. How many more do you have if you have Carter Hart down the stretch? How many more wins do they have this year if that's the case? And they have a different goalie situation.
And if I had to guess, I mentioned earlier that line kind of got drawn between the team and the front office and all this stuff. I wouldn't be surprised, and I do not have any information. This is just speculation on my part.
Go ahead.
I wouldn't be surprised if that line was drawn around the trade deadline last year, because I wouldn't be surprised, and again, this is all pure speculation, if John Tortorella was in there going, Danny, can you get somebody? Danny, can we add? Danny, we need a goalie. Danny, can we do this? We're in a playoff spot. And Danny held firm to the rebuild, traded Sean Walker, traded everybody under the sun who wasn't nailed down. And then at that point, you have lost most of your defensive core via trade and injury. You don't have a goalie. You're playing Sam Ersson 35 out of 37 down the stretch, or whatever crazy number it was. I wouldn't be surprised if that stretch run last year killed John Tortorella's love for this team in that same way.
I don't know if that's the exact time. I go a different direction than what you're saying at this point to a degree, because I think that we can look at all of the other things that have happened this season. I still think that kind of like, and obviously there's a lot being made about Cam York, and he got benched on Tuesday. So you played with 5D in the final game of a 5-game road trip where you're getting totally shelled, and that there's now I'm glad we waited to do this, because today there's even more of a wrinkle to that than there was 24 hours ago. But I look at that, okay, like if a benching of a player is kind of what was part of the final straw to a degree, it's also, I think, what started this whole thing, because I think you go back to, you named a captain and then you sat him. And
a month later,
and you know what? Let me be clear about something, because I don't think I got to elaborate on this as much when I was on the radio yesterday. It's not that you sat him. I don't think it has anything to do with you sat Sean Couturier, sat Matvei Michkov, sat Cam York. I don't think it matters whatsoever. Everybody knows that that's John Tortorella. It's when Cam York got sat the first time around during this recent stretch, and is able to sit there and say, well, I don't know the reason. I don't agree with it. I don't have a reason because, nobody told me. Well, who did that sound like? Sean Couturier brought it to the media last year and said, I don't know why I'm being sat, but I have to take it, I guess. And he didn't cause as much of a storm with it, I guess. But you're not going to tell me that the room didn't react to that. Like, wait a minute. This is the guy that you just told us we're in a position now where we should have a captain, and you sat the captain, and the captain doesn't know why he's being benched.
And I don't think he said too much publicly, but I have a feeling Morgan Frost was in a similar boat.
The issue, okay, there's also an issue with Sean Couturier is not going anywhere. Now, the contract dictates that more than anything, but if you even had a hint that you thought you were going to move that guy, I don't think you'd put a letter on him.
Absolutely.
I'm not talking, and there's a difference between Scott Lawton got a letter and it was, well, he was around for 3 years with a letter and then they moved him.
Exactly.
You don't put a letter on Sean Couturier in February of last year
if you're
and then
him.
This year go, I need to get rid of him. Or not, I shouldn't say like I need to get rid of him. Like, of course, I think that they would value having the cap space to do something different over what. Although, ironically enough, look who's been probably one of the best players in the last 2 weeks. All of a sudden, especially the first game without him.
Yeah, well, listen, there were a lot of guys who had some of their best games of the season first game without him.
Because, all right, so maybe we should shift to, like, I'm going to pull this one up instead because we should really talk more about stuff with this. And then I want to I want to go into, I guess, this everything at the surface, go into the comments themselves, because let's be clear, what he said on Tuesday accelerated this. It's, I looked at that and I even texted you in the group and said, this sounds like a guy who's not back next year. Okay, fine. You can't reason it any other way that before the next game he's gone after saying something like that and not kind of pin some of it on that. Now, Danny Briere glossed over that a little bit and said it was a buildup of things. He didn't dismiss it. Like, he didn't dismiss it as, oh, that wasn't part of it. No, that contributes to it. But it was more than primary.
I think it was the straw that broke the camel's back more than anything. It was just kind of the last, all right.
Or is it? Or did it already happen before he ever said it? Because if it comes back to Cam York sat the game. It was happening in game.
John Tortorella has been a head coach in the NHL since the 1999-2000 season.
Yep.
He took over 4 games. He took over for good in 2000, 2001. But he has been a coach in this league for a quarter of a century. And he has been fired 1, 2, 3, like 4
5 times, I think.
Right.
Right.
5 now, right. 4 times.
Right, well, yes.
I think he probably knew it was coming. He's not an unintelligent man.
Sure.
I think he probably knew it was coming. I don't know if this was him saying, I'm going to be me until the end because I'm John Tortorella and I don't bend for anybody. Or
I don't part know. Of it.
Right. I don't know if this was, I'm auditioning for a new job. This is what you're going to get if you hire me. I don't think it was a great audition if that's the case, but I think he probably knew the time was coming to a close. And you know how when you're leaving a job and your quality slips a little bit and your care slips a little bit as far as how much you give
Yeah,
John Tortorella's give a crap meter is already as low as it gets. And I think it just hit the absolute basement, and he's doing whatever he thought was best, damn the long-term consequences.
Well, part of that has to do with the contract situation, I would say, because he's not typically, he doesn't like coaching in a final year of contract situation. He likes the security. Everybody knew
lame duck John Tortorella does not work.
And everybody knew that was coming at some point.
Yep.
Which, and to be honest with you, like, we were having conversations before it got to this point with the comments where I was sitting there, like, even saying, tell me how this guy is the coach next year. And it really didn't have anything to do with tactics or him being himself or any of it. I just sat there and looked and go, you're Mr. Competitive. We're going to compete. We got to do it the right way. We got to still play the right way, even if we're not the talented team. Like, losing's not the problem, but we have to play the right way. And quite frankly, under John Tortorella, based on everything we've seen, because you already said it to a degree, 31 wins, 38 wins, 28 wins. You tell me how they don't win when you start the trade deadline process and there was 19 games to go from the day after the deadline. You tell me how they don't win like 7 to 9 of those games and go close to 500 under normal John Tortorella circumstances. And they come out of the deadline and they lost again. And they lost again. And there's one of those wins, but then they lost again. And then the entire road trip was losing. And That's why I started to ask him, like, how many wins do they have left in the season under this? And you tell me how a coach, it's all about, well, we're still going to compete and I can make the most out of even the worst roster. And they win 4 out of 21. And you say, well, sure, let's bring you back. I like part of like, and I'm kind of glad I stopped on this because I was writing down numbers that I think are very telling. And this goes right up to Toronto. This goes right up to the last game John Tortorella coached. In just the month of March under John Tortorella, they had a 2-10-1 record in 13 games. Not including the two, by the way, the 2 wins were shootout wins. So not including the goal that I guess you get for winning in the shootout that they add to your total. They had scored 22 goals, which was an average of 1.69 per game. They had given up 49 goals, an average of 3.76 per game. The power play was 0 for 31 in those 13 games. The penalty kill had slipped also to be 23 for 33, which is a 69.7% rate. And that's just March. Then I did this number. They came into a game January 23rd. They played the Rangers. They had started winning a lot of games in January. It was all of a sudden like, oh, look, they're a fringe playoff team again. Maybe, right? The league. What did I say for so much of that time? Well, half the league kind of sucks. So you never know. You get on a run, you're in, right?
You can float to the top.
So they were in the middle. Right. So they were in the middle of January winning games and starting to look like, oh, they might enter the race. And since January 23rd, which, by the way, was a 6-1 loss to the Rangers, because I was there, that was the one of the MSG games, or the only MSG game so far. They are playing there later, in April. That was a 25 game span, 6-16-3, 52 goals for, which was 2.08 per game, 88 goals against, 3.52 per game. This is 25 games. The power play was 4 for 56. That's a 7.1% rate. And the penalty kill, a little better than the numbers I was giving you, kind of really aided by the month of March, because what did I say? They had given up 10 power play goals in just March. Then through January and February, when they played not as many games, obviously, but at the end of January there was a decent amount of games actually. Though it wasn't a small sample, right? Like, what I say, that was still 12 games. So they had only given up, I think, 4 power play goals over those 12, and then it started to fall off. So they still had a 76.3% PK rate, but it's not great. And I just started to look at how those numbers added up, and I'm like, you tell me how, like, especially if you go from that January 23rd number and go, there's 9 games left, you've played 25 to this number. If you finish the final 34 games, now you're approaching half of a season with 9 wins at most. How do you bring the guy back? Especially, and like, it's kind of funny that the one power play goal they scored in the game on Thursday, like after he's gone, wasn't even a traditional power play goal. It's a miss on a shorthanded bid, and then they have an odd man rush. So it's not even like you can say, oh, look, the power play setup did that. But it was getting to a point where you're literally sitting there going, go ahead. Go 0 for on the power play for an entire month, literally. With all those games, too. It was going to be, 16 games in March? Go 0 for in 16 games, and let's see how everybody reacts to that.
Well, and something that has been said around this team for quite a while now and is going to pick up now that your head coach is gone. Rocky Thompson can't run your penalty kill next year.
Well, I think you're setting yourself up for, like, Danny Briere did the nice thing, I think, by saying we're evaluating all of our coaches.
They need to
when we get to the discussing possible options for the next head coach, I'll spoil something for you. I wrote about this already. Bradshaw's in there as an in-house option because I think it's fair to him as an interim to say that. Do I think he's the guy getting it? No.
No, it feels very Scott Gordon.
Well, it does, but okay. Can I counter that though? Because this is, as much as it feels that way, I'll tell you why it doesn't.
Okay.
I think Scott Gordon did have interest in being an NHL head coach. They just weren't interested in giving him the job. I kind of don't think Brad Shaw wants to be a head coach. I think he likes being an assistant. He's willing to take this and enjoy this for the rest of the season.
For 3 weeks, right?
But I don't think there's an element where I'm not sure he even wants to be a head coach. I think he likes the idea of, I coach defense, I coach penalty kill, I am the communicator between the players. I like this.
As an assistant coach, you can still be the good guy in the room. The coach has to be the bad guy sometimes.
And like, listen, like, I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm sure he doesn't have moments where he's willing to be a little tougher, but he's a great guy to talk to. I mean, think about it. I don't know if the last 3 or 4 press conferences on the road with John Tortorella, and on the road it's different because not everybody's there. It's not a full room like it is at home games. But,
sure.
But I don't know that the last 4 press conferences that John Tortorella had post-game added up to the time that Brad Shaw spoke on Thursday.
Okay.
He spoke for over 8 minutes. Now, granted, there was no morning availability. So you're kind of doing some of that in there too, where it's, how was this day for you? The coach got fired. You got to remember something. His time with Torts goes back to Columbus, I think even Vancouver for a little.
Yeah.
So he's been around him for a while. So, like, you can't deny that, that there's a long history there. And it's like, all right, this is the guy you've worked together with for probably 5, 6, 7 years, if you're going back to the Columbus days.
Yeah.
So how does that feel to you? Yeah, it's tough. It's a tough day. And then you're talking about the game, the opportunity, all that type of stuff. Like, but you get the point. So I want to go, but I do want to go back to Tuesday, where this kind of starts to really get to a head with Tortorella. Because I know everybody fixates in on the comment, because that's what stands out, and it's what accelerated this thing. I've been around John Tortorella enough to know that sometimes what he's going to tell you 5 to 10 minutes after the game, because he doesn't have a filter with it, isn't going to be what he meant. So I had to kind of interpret it in my own way. Like, listen, I listened to it, and I did think that there was, like, okay, definitely that's speaking volumes, what you just said. I don't think that's how you meant for it to be taken completely. So, like, everybody looks at that and goes, he said, I'm not interested in coaching the team. I don't think, like, that's not what he said, and I don't believe that's what he meant. I took it as, I don't know what else I can do with the group right now. I'm not interested in learning how to do it, because I don't want this to be the norm, where we're just sitting here with 20 games left going, well, that's it. We're just riding out the schedule. There's no light at the end of the tunnel, but I have to do it because that's where we are, and I have to do a better job with it. But you kind of can't use the wording not interested and not have it taken. There's no way it doesn't get taken out of context. There's no way. And I've been like, you'll hear me out with this, because you'll see it from that fan perspective that you bring. I've seen it in a different way, obviously, being where I am. I've been covering this team for 11 seasons, and I've seen coaches come and go, and it's been a trend that has gone on long before I started doing this in the first place. There kind of comes a point when you just know, whether it's fair or not to the coach, you're reaching the end. I didn't read that, see those comments, hear how he said it. I didn't sit there and think, well, he's gone tomorrow. I did think we were going to find out at the end of the season he's not back. This is the end of the line. When it was, and so this is where I want you to hear me out, because this is just me going off of how many times can we pinpoint this moment when it comes to a coach. When it was Ken Hitchcock to John Stevens to Peter Laviolette, Peter Laviolette to Craig Berube, you can see the writing on the wall for those guys, it's the writing on the wall in the traditional sense. It's performance related. We have high expectations. You're not living
8-2.
Right. You're not living up to high expectations. I mean, but look at Peter Laviolette's case. 0-3. See ya. Right? That was the team had high expectations, wasn't doing well, and this was the Ed Snyder run Flyers. when they moved on from Berube and the writing was kind of on the wall because that was, well, Ron Hextall's here now. He's going to make his choice as general manager. Okay. When that ran its course, it was pretty obvious. You already brought this one up. It was pretty obvious Scott Gordon was temporary. Okay. But then as they change general managers, change coaches, you saw that the writing was on the wall with another move. They, with Alain Vigneault, there is this one in particular, there's always something that stood out to me. I don't remember if it was the exact game before, if it was 2 games before he got fired, but you're talking about a coach at this point who is tons of experience, among the best in the NHL in all time in wins. And he was just
maybe,
Go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
And he was just at that given moment out of answers, out of ideas. I don't know what else I can do. I'm at wit's end. I'm beside myself. I have nothing else I can do. And there's a defeated element to it. My job is to, and I saw that with Alain Vigneault. And that was what I was sensing from John Tortorella in that moment was, it's not that I'm not interested in doing this anymore. It's I don't know how to do it. I don't want to have to figure it out. And I really at this point in the season, no less, I don't know how I'm supposed to figure it out. There's 9 games left. What do you want me to do? So I don't think those comments were meant to be taken literally, but let's draw the again, this is try to put yourself to a degree, put yourself in Tortorella's shoes as he's answering that question or saying that type of thing and going, we've done this for 3 years now. You're missing the playoffs again. You're now losing among the worst of the worst. You're just trying to get to the end of the season.
But it's might be the worst team in the league right now.
Sure. I mean,
I think San Jose beats the Flyers in a 7-game series. I think Chicago beats the Flyers in a 7-game series. All of the above.
Do you know what's funny about this? Okay, so they and I'm not trying to jump to the game that they play, but they play the game they do. They win because sure. Take the shackles off everybody. Your coach got, love him or hate him, the coach got fired, right?
Flyers puck line was the easiest bet in the world last night.
And the funny part is as much as right now you probably don't want them to win games, there was one team behind them that lost. Buffalo kept doing their part. Seattle stayed in front of them because they won a game. Even the freaking San Jose Sharks beat the Toronto Maple Leafs in a shootout. Everybody who is at the bottom was and for what it's worth, and I saw somebody write, I think it was Arpon Basu who wrote this today, because I actually put it in the group from Montreal's perspective. That looked like the Flyers last year. That team with the opportunity, this team's at the bottom, we should totally win. What kind of showing was that? And that was the exact headline on that article was, they have to do, you need to fix it because you want to avoid the fate that they had last year. And that's what's kind of bringing me this, because that's the other hard part about it is that, and I want to be careful with not how I say it, but I want to make sure it's taken understanding that it means 2 different things when I say this word, but it's going to be 2 years in a row that you really crumbled down the stretch, not from a playoff perspective. Like last year it was, you were in a playoff spot, you crumbled, you missed the playoffs. This year it was,
and then you got atrocious.
Right, but this year it was for 60 games. Even though you weren't a playoff team, you had elements that were like, this team's still kind of fun. They have a little something. They still have that quality about them. And then the trade deadline hit, and you went to unwatchable.
Yep, absolutely.
And like we talked about, because you've come to the kind of the defense where it's like, well, but they gutted the roster. Totally agree. They have gutted the roster. It's more understandable, but isn't that also John Tortorella's bread and butter to say, I can get the most out of what I got, even if it's a lack of talent, and still remain and the key word, remain competitive, not necessarily win, but remain competitive. This wasn't competitive.
And that is what leads me to this. That is what leads me to the thought process that John Tortorella kind of quit, not quit on the team as far as he wasn't doing his job, but in his head, I think he knew it was over. Talking trade deadline last year, because 2 days before the trade deadline last year, when they still have Sean Walker, when they're still in a playoff
winning
spot,
a bunch of
cetera,
games,
et cetera,
too.
et cetera. Right. I think that is the last time that John Tortorella had a roster that was anywhere close to capable of making the playoffs with this team.
Sure.
Obviously, it crumbled down the stretch. You trade Sean Walker, blah, 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 blah. This year, you didn't really add much to the team, and then you made more subtractions, at the trade deadline and a futures deal with Calgary and et cetera, et cetera. What I want to come back to here is what has John Tortorella, what has Danny Briere's message been since minute one of being the general manager? My job is to fix the culture. Okay. And that started with the roster. We talked about your Kevin Hayes. We talked about your blah, 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 blah.
Oh, sure.
Turning that roster over from what it was to what it is now. It's a new group in the locker room. It's a new everything. The trades Danny Briere made this year. Last year, Danny gutted the roster for talent. This year, I think Danny did another culture purge, and that's not a bad thing. I'm not saying you got rid of, a Kevin Hayes type. Right. May have been a problem in the locker room, but you got rid of Joel Farabee, Morgan Frost, Scott Lawton. 3 major cornerstones of that locker room.
See, I'm going to disagree with you on something. I don't think he gutted the roster as much as he could have last year. I think he actually did John Tortorella a service by saying the only thing I'm moving is Sean Walker because, there's a first-round pick hanging out there for it. And I could have done this, and I could have done Nick Sealer. I could have done, a bunch of others at that time. I didn't, so you had a shot. You got to the last day of the season. Now this year, we're not there. I got to do what I got to do.
Right. What I'm saying is the trades Danny made last year were trades for hockey purposes. This year, it seems like you're looking for a bit of a culture shift. Now, maybe you want your Owen Tippett's and Tyson Forsters and Jamie Drysdales to be the corner of your locker room and kind of be that. But you moved out the old regime, right? Like, what do Frost, Farabee, and Lawton have in common? They all predate Danny Briere as the general manager.
Yeah,
and I know a lot of guys do, but those are guys from, especially Scott Lawton.
Especially Scott Lawton. Well, especially Scott Lawton, who freaking played with Danny Briere for a brief period. Seriously. Yeah.
What I'm saying is, I think that is Danny Briere going, okay, these 3 guys have been here through probably the worst 10-year stretch in Flyers history, at least in recent Flyers history, let's say that. And moving those guys forces a new culture to emerge. And I think by getting rid of 3 veterans this year and then the coach at the end of the year, you are trying your absolute best to clean slate it for next year.
Yeah, big time.
Right.
Because especially when you consider they're probably not done.
Well, right. And maybe this is how we transition into potential new hires for Tortorella.
I want to stay. I agree. We will. I want to stay on something with this for a second because you're right about the direction thing. One of the things I wondered, and this is a good this is not a good transition necessarily for the next head coach thing, but it is a good transition for some of the offseason stuff because you've got a boatload of picks, right? And you're depending. Look, they won a game. Okay, fine, they won a game. It pretty much with the exception of Nashville losing at the same time, which by the way, they still have a path to pass you without you doing anything. You lose the head-to-head on Monday, and they win both of the games in hand. They still pass you. You know what I mean? Like there's still a way for that to happen, and it's not like Nashville. Like let's face it, I think Nashville's got 2 losses over the last week or something like that, and they're both to St. Louis, who's on just a total tear. They're becoming that team again.
Yeah, they are.
That's, you know what I mean?
To St. Louis. Yeah.
But the reason why I want to go into this is because. And I don't want to make this unfair to the player I'm going to bring up because I don't want to downplay that he still has a lot of time to become something better than what he is or whatever. But I think that 2 names, I'm going to bring this name into the picture and then it's going to go with another name that we brought up. And then I think I'll figure out the way to get the other one in there, I guess, that I've really been thinking of more than anything. But we've already talked about Cam York. So connect the dots with me, if you will, on this. We've already talked about Cam York, the fact that he sat out, and there may have been something that happened. They said Bradshaw said after Thursday that there was a disciplinary issue that was why he didn't play. He sat on the bench the whole game.
The Cam York stuff's weird.
Okay, so Cam York is on the bench after sitting out, after being benched by Tortorella the game before. There's a guy who is playing on the other side that has a tie to Cam York in a couple different ways, but one in particular, so I'm talking about the Canadians roster now. I'm sure you can figure it out in your head. Don't say it yet. I'll get there. Okay. And there was another piece of news that came out on Thursday after John Tortorella got fired that is, on the surface, by the way, is going to be great for the player. Jetlachenko's going to the Phantoms. So I'm bringing Jetlachenko into this conversation. You're the Flyers last year at the draft. You're sitting there, 12th overall pick. The pick comes up, and you trade back. Now, when you were sitting there at 12 at that given moment, though, what were your choices?
Top of my head here.
Well, I've got it, so I'll tell you.
Okay.
You were looking. Everybody kind of thought it's probably a center, right? And Jetlachenko wasn't the center on everybody's mind. It was Konsta Helenius.
And then I know everybody wanted Zeev Boyum.
You
pronounce his
last name. Yes. Who is killing it in the college ranks right now, right?
Seems like a great player. Absolutely.
Very high rank. Okay, here's why this matters. And I'm not saying they did this specifically, but it does feel this way when you talk about what kind of player Jetlachenko is. What kind of center is Jetlachenko? Or what are the qualities when they draft a guy? When you get the draft profile in front of you, when we start looking into these guys after they're drafted, what did they come away with Jetlachenko?
I think the big one on him was his skating.
He's a good skater. Okay, that's fine. But kind of to a degree, everybody should be. If you're not a good skater, you're a work in progress. Let's be real, right?
Sure.
What was the other quality though? He's a really good two-way center. He's a penalty killer. Now, what does that sound like? Sounds like a guy fit for a John Tortorella lineup. You've got to be careful when drafting that you're not drafting for a coach that's going to be here for a very small handful of years of a player's career. You need to draft to their skill set. Why do people not like, and I don't get me wrong. I think that Matvei Michkov has had a great year under John Tortorella. I thought it was impressive that your power play is terrible and you somewhat hold him back. He's been benched. He's been sat during games and he still had over 50 points in all these games under Tortorella without so much as a power play, right?
Well, and they showed on the broadcast last night that he was since January, whatever it was.
Yeah, he's one of the top point producers at 5-on-5.
As far as 5-on-5 in the league, not
in the league.
Rookies, but
I know
the top point producer. Number one.
So, but what did we say about Michkov when he was picked? And I know that the pick kind of fell into their laps at 7. I get it. But what did we say about it? You're taking a swing.
A Torts pick.
No. You're taking a swing. You know there's a risk element to picking him, but you also know that if you don't pick him, you're letting somebody else get possibly a really great talent that you don't have. So go back to you're faced with that pick at 12. You decide to trade back. You could have picked Zeev Boyum, which isn't probably the type of player that you want to throw into John Tortorella's lap per se. But why? But why would you?
He was going to college, so that's a little different.
I understand it. I'm saying whatever the reason why you felt like I can't make that pick, whether it was he's a college prospect, I think isn't his agent the same as Cutter Gautier's?
Yep.
Whatever the reason, you kept going to. I'm going to pick the safe guy, the safe two-way hockey sense guy that ends up being a projected second liner. If I'm not saying Zeev Boyum's going to be a top pair defenseman per se, but what if he is? What if Zeev Boyum is the next Roman Yossi?
Yeah.
No. Like, they don't. But I know that. I'm saying every time they've made a pick outside of Michkov over the last 5 years, it's always been this guy's safe. This guy has this kind of ability. They don't take. You can even argue this going back to, and again, whether you were afraid of something or not with this, they picked it late, right after they picked Michkov. They picked Oliver Bonk over Gabe Perreault. When World Juniors rolled around, who was getting more buzz? Gabe Perreault. Because it even goes back as far, and this isn't even Danny Briere. This isn't even under John Tortorella. It goes back to Cam York over Cole Caulfield. You know, that's sitting in front of you, and you decide, no, we don't want the 50 goal scorer who, or whatever he had. What do you have? 60 goals that year with the US team? Something ridiculous, right? You pick the defenseman who is, some offensive skill set, but kind of steady, right? Like
right with a top 2, 3, 4 kind of ceiling. Yeah, exactly.
But why? Because it felt safe, right? It felt like, we don't want to take the super short guy who scores a lot of goals because we don't know if that's going to translate. Do you want me to give you a list of other players that they could have taken? And I'm not saying this means all these guys were the safe pick, and some of them work out better than others, by the way. Like, for example, Ivan Provorov was here for a long time. It's not a bad pick.
And you got value moving him too.
Right? Well, and you got value moving him. But Ivan Provorov was taken in front of Zach Werenski and Mikko Rantanen.
Yeah.
That's a little, and I know that's probably a little bit more of a stretch because he's had a really good NHL career.
Well, now do you want Rantanen was an unknown. Let's be honest. Nobody had Rantanen scouted like that.
Oh, really? Because I thought he was one of the better players in that draft.
Okay, fair enough.
To me,
and
I don't know
that way. So.
I don't know that I thought Werenski was going to be the better defenseman than Provorov at that time.
Fair.
Turns out that that's the case. Obviously, I've thrown Werenski's name in a Norris conversation,
and
I'm not throwing Ivan Provorov's his freaking teammate, and I'm not doing that. You know. Anyway, do you want two of the bigger swings and misses? Then.
Okay. Oh, you're gonna hit me with Jay O'Brien, aren't you?
No, actually, I'm not, but that's not a bad one because it was Jay O'Brien over. Well, you know why? Because the guy that I think everybody would have taken in that spot was Keandre Miller, and that hasn't been exactly the great. Like, that kind of qualified as safe also to a degree.
He's got a bunch more NHL games than Jay O'Brien does.
That is true. No, the one I'm going to hit you with was this was 2016, I think.
Right, so the year before Nolan Patrick.
They traded up in the second round, and everybody thought they were going to take this player because, again, goal scoring. You needed a skill guy. You needed a guy who scored a lot of goals at the time when playing juniors.
Right.
So everybody thought they traded up because, oh my goodness, how did Alex DeBrincat get to the second round? And instead they selected Pascal Laberge, who never made it. No NHL game.
I was going to say, did he not make a debut at some point? Maybe he played some preseason games.
Nope.
Yeah.
He was hurt a lot. He ended up with the same thing, like concussion history, that kind of stuff.
I really liked Pascal Laberge's profile as a prospect. Yeah.
And you can like a guy's profile as a prospect, but there's a reason why everybody thinks you're trading up in that spot because, oh my goodness, how did the guy with over 50 goals in juniors who played next to Connor freaking McDavid, slip into the second round? Go get him. And then you go up and you get somebody totally different. And that was, for what it's worth, by the way, that was the Hextall era. So that was probably just a Hextall type of guy.
Well, and I wonder, should a situation like that arise now, would Danny Briere be a little more willing to take the smaller skilled speed guy?
I'm not even saying you have to do it all the time. It's just,
but you know what I'm saying is, maybe a DeBrincat situation doesn't happen if
it's hard. Sure, of course. Well, and here's an example for you. You also are looking for defense. I'm not saying this guy's the best defenseman out there by any stretch, but you're looking for defensemen. You go in, you picked Wade Allison, and I think it was 2 picks later, Philip Hronek went. Well, okay, here's an example. Do you know why this even started? Some of this started to come up or whatever. So we're sitting at home. I'm at home last night because I didn't go to the game. I'm watching from home. My family came over to spend some time, hang out, whatever. And I'm sitting there talking to my dad, and I point out who I even said, because he brought up, I wonder if he's rookie, meaning Michkov. I wonder if he's rookie of the year because he comes out, he has 2 goals, he plays great, right? I wonder if he's rookie of the year if he's able to do more of what he's doing right now because it looks like he's freer, naturally, of course, right? That kind of thing. And I sit there and I kind of go into, well, I'll tell you who I think is going to win rookie of the year, and we've had this conversation on the show already before. And see, I don't think it's going to be that way anymore because now the tables have turned a little bit since we had that conversation. Remember what we said about Dustin Wolf with that? It was, well, if they make the playoffs, it's got to be him. Calgary has slipped enough now that I think that they're not going to make it. And who's holding the last playoff spot in the East?
That would be the Montreal Canadiens
with a rookie defenseman who now has over 50 assists.
Montreal fans are going to be so unbearable online if Lane Hudson wins.
But I sit there and
I'd rather give it to Macklin Celebrini.
And he's had a great rookie year. Don't get me wrong. I'm just telling you now.
It's a spectacular rookie class. Like Matvei Michkov might not be nominated, and that's insane.
Well, and here's the thing. You know who else isn't going to be nominated? I think everybody would have put there a year ago at this time. Logan Stankoven.
Yep.
I think people would have, like, Stankoven was supposed to be one of these hot on his heels competition guys, and he's been not nothing, but like it hasn't been. Traded. Well, yeah, obviously, yeah, I hear you.
That's what I'm saying.
But I look at, like, okay, and then you start to go into, well, what was the thing with, what was it with Lane Hudson? What happened there? Where did he get taken? And you go in and find out that he was 62nd overall.
Well, it's a great pick.
Sure. You know what I mean? So and right away, then you start asking questions. Well, what did everybody not see in this kid or whatever? First of all, sometimes it's not there when he's 17, 18, and it turns out that 2-3 years later, it is there. You know what I mean?
Right. Turns out puberty can hit a little bit later. You get that last sometimes it's spurt, whatever it is.
Sometimes it's as simple as that.
Yep.
But sometimes it's just different elements of it. Why not pick, like, seriously, why not pick Cole Caulfield over Cam York? Because Cole Caulfield's really short and may not translate to the NHL game the way that they think. What if he gets pushed around and now he scores 20 goals? I don't want to pick a guy like that all over the fact that he's scored 60 in juniors. That's juniors. Or with the U.S. team, I mean. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I'm going back to the DeBrincat one then, too, because DeBrincat was scoring in bunches in juniors. Like, I don't want to pick the guy who scores in bunches in juniors and then comes in and scores 15 to 20 in the NHL because he gets pushed around all the time. You know what I mean? That does happen.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that now that you're going to have a different head coach going forward, I think that you can't, like, John Tortorella was all about competitive play, but always kind of made it seem like the goaltending's, and not that it isn't a problem, but the goaltending's a major problem. I need saves, but I need everybody else to be able to kind of contribute to that and kind of play 2-1 games when the rest of the league is out here telling you it's still a 5-4 league. Play more like the Oilers, not more like the New Jersey Devils of 2000.
Or the Kings, right?
You know what I mean? Like, so I just hope that they move forward with this in a sense where, all right, you've put your flag in the ground now. You have said, this is not the head coach going forward. You know what it really turns into right away? And I didn't, like, I'm thinking about this just in the here and now. I wish I kind of had thought about this for the reactionary column that I do. It's firmly Danny Briere's team now.
Absolutely, it is. And that's kind of what I was getting to with that, the breaking up of the triumvirate, right? Like,
yes,
it is the front office is running things. The bench boss is on the bench. That line has been kind of clear.
And now you finally give this Jones-Briere duo a chance to name a coach for themselves. So
that brings me to some of the possible names,
yeah.
Right? So the first name that I saw online, and I will admit to you, he is probably at the top of my wish list as well.
Go ahead.
Is David Carl from the University of Denver?
Yes,
now, there are some issues there. Never been an NHL head coach. I don't think that's an issue, for the record.
No, I don't either.
Only 35 years old. I also don't think that's an issue, for the record. The biggest issue is that it certainly seems to be the case that he has been offered at least a half a dozen head coaching jobs over the last couple of years.
One thing truly one thing you can't fault on his part is if he doesn't want it, that's on him.
And that's what I was going to say, is he seems, at this point, he has given no indication that he has any desire to leave the University of Denver. He has an incredible resume there. He has been there since a graduate assistant coach, other than a year and a half in the USHL with the Green Bay Gamblers. He's been there his entire adult life as an assistant hockey coach, basically. And if he doesn't want to leave, man. He's winning chips over and over and over again.
His resume is so good, you forget that he started. Like, it doesn't sound like he should be 35 years old. He's got a resume that sounds like he should be 50. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. And
That's the resume that you kind of like when Dave Haxtell got hired. It's like that's the resume you wanted presented to you, where it's like multiple national championships, coaching world junior teams. Oh yeah, we're ready to go down that because believe me, I can already sense that there's a little hesitation on the part of he's the next big college guy.
The last time you hired a major college prospect coach,
but in fairness, by the way, and this is a guy who by the time this happened already had NHL, or last time you were making a coaching selection already had NHL experience. But we floated this with Jim Montgomery at the time,
right?
Hey, he was the hotshot college guy, and now he's done some stuff at the NHL level too. Maybe you pick him because he's he is established in that developmental circle, correct? That comes into play. It's certainly up to him. This is where my blank checkbook comment came in, because you could open it up. Yeah. You could open it up, write a check for $10 million, and he might still say, "I still like the college life."
I really like Denver, actually. Right.
Yeah. I don't blame him. Denver's a really nice city, by the way.
Absolutely. And
but I digress. What I'm talking about is that if he wants to coach college for the rest of his life, let him coach college. I wonder. If you
can get him, you get him.
Now, everybody tries to, and there's going to certainly be. When I wrote out a list of 7 possible options, and I believe that of the 7, 5 of them have a direct connection to the Flyers in some capacity, or not direct, but like not direct, but like have a way where you can.
Might be my favorite.
Sure, because to me, if you want to try to talk him into this, Danny Briere could certainly call up ex-teammate Matt Carl and say, "Hey, can you talk to your brother about how great Philly is?"
Yeah, and I think. If David Carl is willing to leave, I hope Matt could kind of steer him in this direction.
Sure.
But yeah, with him, he's got the resume, he's got the skill, he's got the ability to coach and bring along young players. So as you're kind of developing out of your rebuild, and Danny Briere did mention, by the way, that he hopes that yesterday, the John Tortorella firing day, is rock bottom.
Yeah, after we're done this, in the process of getting this posted as well, I am going to write more on the press conference itself. But that, by the way, so David Carl, even for an outside, as I considered it, an outside the box candidate, because you're going to the college ranks there. In David Carl's specific, like as from first person perspective, he has no connection to the Flyers whatsoever. The connection is his brother was a Flyer, who also happened to play on the same trip to the Stanley Cup final team that the GM did.
Let me see how many of your candidates I can get here. You said you have 7 written down?
I have 7. I don't think to be fair, by the way, I don't think you're going to guess the 2 that don't have a Flyer tie in some capacity.
And that's fine. Let's work through the list here a little bit. I mentioned it briefly earlier.
Do the right. I would say do the easy ones first. I only wrote down 2. Well, I wrote down 2 here. Let me, because I categorized them too for what it's worth.
2 from in-house.
Yes, I wrote down 2 in
Bradshaw.
Exactly. It's Bradshaw. If you decide that you think that that's the direction to go, I can understand where you're coming from with that to a degree. I don't think that's what they're going to do, but you have to leave it as an option. And Ian LaPerriere is the other, because, and again, think about this.
He has just been around too long. He has interim coached with the team
before. Well, right. This is how I wrote it. He's 90 minutes away in Lehigh Valley. He's been with the organization since 2009-10. He joined the coaching side. No, that's player.
Sorry. Okay, you're right.
He joined the coaching ranks in 2013. Yep. Assistant coach with the Flyers for up until 21-22 when he became the head coach of the Phantoms. Now, to LaPerriere's credit, he's gotten the Phantoms into playoffs while the team has kind of bounced around guys left and right with we're going to do this, we're going to do that, whatever.
Some pretty inconsistent lineup decisions forced into LaPerriere. Yeah.
The thing that, to be honest with you, it's not even just about whether or not he's an in-house option. Of course, they would probably explore that in-house option. I would have to imagine though that. And again,
he would have been a teammate of Danny Briere's too, wouldn't he?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, I just kind of put that together.
Teammate of Danny Briere, and let's put it this way: anybody, I don't care who it is, anybody with a tie to Keith Jones, or anybody with a tie to the Flyers since 2000 has a tie to Keith Jones. He's been around since then, so it's always going to be in there. What I'm going to get at is that if you pick somebody who's not Bradshaw or Ian LaPerriere as your next head coach.
I think I have guesses for your other two Flyers connections.
Well, we'll get there, but
okay.
If you pick anybody other than those two guys, and it's not a disrespect or like you didn't do a good enough job at this, I don't think he can be your coach in the minor league system because you need an alignment here. Whoever's coaching your minor league team needs to be somebody who can align exactly with what you're doing at the NHL level. And I'd be very curious to see how the next head coach coaches this team to a degree and maybe brings it into the 20 with no disrespect to John Tortorella and the way he wanted the team to play, but brings them into the 21st century of the NHL, right? I want to see how modern it like isn't it amazing how they looked when I'm sure there's no instruction?
Oh yeah.
Bradshaw's the coach. Go play. Matvei Michkov has 3 points. You're kidding, right?
Right. I guarantee you.
All right, so go ahead.
You guys know what you're doing. Yeah.
Hit me with your two with who you think the other two are with Flyers connections. One of them is such a layup. If you don't get it, I'm going to be disappointed in you.
I know that Rick Tocchet's contract is expiring in Vancouver.
Okay, so that's one of them, though. You know that's one of them. That I even wrote in the article that if you're going to go the traditional ex-Flyer route, it's the most logical choice. He was already linked to them before they hired Tortorella.
The other one, and I if we're thinking of the same person, it might be a little less likely now that it looks like they're going to make the playoffs. But I really thought there was a chance that Craig Berube was going to be fired in St. Louis.
Nope.
That's not who you're talking about. Okay.
Not even on the list.
I was thinking that if St. Louis continued their struggle and if they ended up missing the playoffs this year, I could have seen it being.
I wrote this down.
Yeah.
I think that this possibility went from way more likely to I've got to float it as an option because if it does happen this way, then I think it's an option, but I don't think it's as likely anymore because this was the option I had in mind, even above a guy like Rick Tocchet, if John Tortorella goes upstairs after the season, which was if Pittsburgh makes a coaching change, what are the odds that John Tortorella's best buddy behind the benches is the next Flyers head coach?
Man, that's one way to kickstart that rivalry back up.
Now, here's the thing. I tend to believe, which by the way, there's a lot of coaches. You bring up Craig Berube, for example, and ironically enough, who the hell knows if Toronto falls the hell apart again? Do they decide to do something stupid? I don't know. I think he should stay there for a little more than one season, but that's just me. Because I hate the constant carousel of coaches that happens. Right. I don't think you can ever I know that it's been floated. I don't think you can ever go back to Craig Berube because I don't think it's going to be the same anyway. You had him. If you thought he was going to be good enough, you would have stuck with them. You didn't.
Yeah, but now he's got more experience. Like that Flyers
and I get it. I'm not the guy. I kind of tend to think that when a coaching bridge has been burned, it's been burned.
Okay, I get that.
You know what I mean? I just don't see that happening. Here's an example. Okay, John Tortorella got fired, and one of the first things I had was, and we all know what he said, right? We all know he said that was it. It was this and he was done, right? But now he's out and you never know. You never know, right? So somebody immediately floated at me. Boston? What for John Tortorella?
I know.
No. Now here's the thing. I would not put Mike Sullivan in Boston again because I think that once you go down that path, he coached him for 2 years. You go down that path, the bridge is burned. It's over.
Okay.
You know where I would put Mike Sullivan, though, if something were to change?
Okay.
I told you this before. Rangers. That you send the Stanley Cup winning coach to go to a team that you're still trying to get a little something out of.
Yeah, that sucks. It sounds like it would be really good for them, and that sucks as a Flyers fan.
Sure it does. But if Mike Sullivan goes to the Rangers, that means Peter Laviolette's out of a job. I don't go back to Peter Laviolette either because that's not the right... You know what I mean? I'm not going down a bridge burned. There's only so much you can do. But again, I think that that's way less likely now than it was. If Tortorella is still part of the organization and decides I'm not coaching the team, I think Mike Sullivan's almost, if he's available, I think it's almost a layup.
Okay.
I'm floating it now because I don't think you can take it off the table. I think it's somebody they would look at, but I don't think that that's the guy. But that was my indirect Flyer connection. It's literally Torts' best buddy.
Right.
You know what I mean? There's one connection. You did the in-house guys. We got
Let me try to guess one of your random names. I think I have everybody other than your random two, right?
At this point, these are the only two that don't have a direct connection, so to speak.
Is one of them Jay Woodcroft?
Yes, it is, because here's why.
I've been saying Jay Woodcroft's name since the day he got fired from Edmonton.
Here's the biggest reason why, and I'll read you my first line of the blurb I put under his name as an option.
Okay.
Remember those visits to Flyers training camp back in September?
Yep.
You know,
the other guess I have.
Go ahead. This is the one I don't think you're going to get, because this is under the outside the box category, not a veteran head coach. So.
Okay. So it's not Jeremy Colleton?
No. It's not. This is not anybody who is.
Quite frankly, I think Jeremy Colleton would be a fantastic, at least
I'm going to tell you right. I'm going to tell you right now. The last name I wrote down as an outside the box candidate too has probably as much head coaching experience in the NHL as Brad Shaw does, because it's an interim basis type thing. Okay. Like, he did it for a little. He's more known as an assistant / minor leagues.
Okay.
Todd Nelson.
Okay.
Todd Nelson, who is currently coaching the Hershey Bears, has won back-to-back Calder Cups. So basically, basically, my two outside the box candidates are the hottest college coach and the hottest minor league coach.
Right.
If you want to try to advance in two ways. One, take two guys who obviously are proven with working with younger players. No doubt about that, right? Like, you're only talking about the best minor league coach and the best junior / college coach, world junior / college coach, right? If that were to work, you have your two in-house options, and the three guys I wrote down for now, pending other options, that become available that we aren't thinking of in the moment. Rick Tocchet, Mike Sullivan, Jay Woodcroft.
This is the first real opportunity for Dan Hilferty to prove he's Snyder 2.0, because Ed Snyder would go get one of those guys.
What do you mean? Get one of the outside the box guys?
Anybody, one of those names that you mentioned. They're not going to talk to, the second guy on LA's bench, the second guy on LA's bench. Based on that, guess who the next head coach is?
If Dan Hilferty really wants to be Ed Snyder 2.0, then the next head coach of the Philadelphia Flyers is Rick Tocchet. Probably. You know it. I know it. If you go down that path, that's who it is.
And listen, Danny, looking in the eyes here. Don't interview Joel. Don't call him.
I don't think they're. I know somebody. I know that got floated around. I really don't think they're interested.
And I hope not, because Ed Snyder would probably call him. I don't know if he'd hire him, but he'd probably call him.
I think that. Well, and listen, if that's how it goes, that's how it goes. Like, my job isn't to worry about whether or not they're moral about it. I get that. I think that if you're trying to read between the lines of what's happening, and especially if something hit a breaking point, because I'm not even so listen, I'm thinking I saw the writing on the wall in terms of you're losing a lot with John Tortorella down the stretch. I don't know how you bring him back next year. I'm not convinced that they wouldn't have, though. If something didn't happen, Briere told you, this built up over 3 weeks, kind of since the trade deadline. It doesn't sound like at the trade deadline when they sold that it was like, we're going to make a coaching change too. So now all of a sudden you've already done your part, and all that needs to happen is Vancouver to say, yeah, no thanks, Toc.
Well. And Vancouver doesn't even have to say no thanks, Toc. His contract.
That's true.
He can say
he can just walk.
Well, and they apparently they have been interested in extending him, and
Toc is waiting,
kind of stiff arming.
I know.
I almost wonder if he had a feeling that John Tortorella was going to.
Maybe I don't know.
Coaches aren't stupid.
No, I know. And here's the reason why. And I'm not saying this makes Tocchet the best choice. Here's why it makes it. Here's more logic to it. When Danny Briere took over the GM job, when Keith Jones took over the president job, Keith Jones, remember when he took over as the president, we all sat there and went, Where did that come from? The broadcasters turning, going into the hockey ops department.
A little random. Yeah.
It felt that way.
Yeah.
But what was the common theme that both Briere and Jones have laid forward in front of you? Tortorella did this too to a degree, but he didn't have the history with it that these two do. It was, we've got to restore. I'm tired of watching it this way. I know the fans are. We've got to restore Flyers hockey to the way
the Flyers identity. Yeah.
And I can see Rick Tocchet coming in and being the exact same way. Not the identity per se. Like you say identity, it sounds like the way they play. I
miss Alain Vigneault so much. Be a bleeping Flyer. Be a bleeping Flyer.
See, I don't miss that per se, only because to me, John Tortorella could have given you the same stuff. Okay, great. That's the behind the scenes video. They put a camera in there, and you got and you know what? You got Alain Vigneault saying it versus John Tortorella saying it, because John Tortorella probably didn't want the cameras around like crazy.
Oh, definitely.
You know what I mean?
No
like, shot. I mean, for God's sakes, at the beginning of the year, they did put a camera in front of John Tortorella, made him look like the supervillain with the rope test video, and
there weren't many videos after that. Crazy.
Well, no, they do it through training camp, and then when the season starts, they got to kind of pull back.
They tail off.
You know what? I just had that thought, by the way. I'm going to miss the rope test next year. I'm going to miss the day that we all show up and watch players just skate until they're ready to go.
You know who's not going to miss it?
Everybody else. Cam York.
No kidding. Morgan Frost.
Well, he's not here anyway. That's what I'm saying.
I know.
I to be honest, I'm not thoroughly convinced that Cam York is here next year either, for what it's worth. But
no, absolutely not. But that is information for a next show. I think this is a good time to put a little bit of a pin in it for now. I think we covered all of our emergency podcast topics. A couple of games. We don't have our next show absolutely nailed down, but there's at least a couple of games.
I think it's going to happen between. I think it's still on pace to be like Tuesday of next week after they play Monday.
We're on Kevin's daughter's schedule a little bit here. So.
No, eventually we'll be on we'll be on regular. Like
I know.
At least by the day. I can't promise you it's going to be in the morning or the evening. It's just going to be what it'll be.
But regardless, we have a Buffalo game and a Nashville game to talk about. Frankly, at this point, almost every team in the league is ahead of you in the standings, including both of these.
No, they're not.
Oh, is Nashville not?
Both of them aren't technically. They're going to go into the game against Buffalo, and Buffalo's still a point behind because everybody won.
I didn't realize Buffalo had fallen off that hard. Okay.
No, Buffalo's ahead of you in points or in points percentage.
Points percentage, yeah.
Because Buffalo is still sitting there. Like it's remarkable to me how this schedule works.
Yeah, the Flyers only have 8 games left, but Buffalo has
11. And 2 head-to-head against the Flyers. Like, we could be having this conversation about who finishes lower in the standings going into the last game of the season.
Yep.
With Nashville, it's a little different. Like, Nashville, man, what a disappointment that team has been, too. Like, to have the players they do and they really can't beat. So, like, they've been a little better lately, but they really can't beat a lot of teams. Like, I was sitting there laughing at the fact that the Flyers were having the game that they were having in Bradshaw's first game behind the bench and all that stuff. And Pittsburgh's getting dismantled by Buffalo.
Frankly, I'd start Igor Zamula in net against Buffalo. Like, listen. And frankly, I'd start Cam York against Nashville. You need to lose these games.
I hear you.
If the Flyers lose games between now and our next show, the odds of getting 3rd pick in the draft is not impossible. Like right now,
it wasn't going in.
Buffalo has a bunch of games in hand, so they'll probably trickle past the Flyers here. But Nashville's right there. They've played 2 fewer games. Well, if Buffalo 5 points behind.
And honestly, I'm going with it like this because Buffalo should be ahead of you when this hits. If they win Saturday, which by the way, Buffalo's playing really, really well lately. Like they're winning a lot of games. Sure, I don't know why they're doing what they're doing per se, but they're winning a lot of games. And maybe it's because after a certain point you can't sell off everything because like, geez, what are you going to do? Sell Rasmus Dahlin and Tage Thompson?
And
they've won 6 of 10 and won 3 straight. Buffalo.
I think the Dylan Cousins situation was weighing pretty heavily on that team.
You mean probably like the like at the time that they moved Jack Eichel that was weighing on it too? Like, I get it.
Casey Middlestat, Ryan O'Reilly, like nobody. I mean, hello.
What's Nashville's record in the last? And Nashville's 4-5-1 in the last 10. It's better than the Flyers, despite the loss. You know what I mean? Like,
so hopefully in a couple of days, we're sitting here talking about 2 losses and starting to look at top 3-4 picks in the draft.
I mean, you kind of want it to be as foolproof as possible. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're getting to that point, or at the very least, what you're doing it's both. It's you either end up smack in the middle of the top 5 for sure, and you get one of those players, and you just have to hope you pick the right one, like you did, kind of a la 2017, when everybody else in the top 5 turned into an all-star except for the guy you picked.
Somehow they're gonna go on like a 6-game run here and end up picking like 11th.
No, that's probably impossible.
I know.
No, but I think you do worry about going from, say, 5th to 7th. That makes a difference too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
in terms of your lottery balls, in terms of the guy you end up getting,
because now you have to like let's do it this way. Everybody else kind of has done their part for the most part. Like Seattle winning last night too keeps them a point ahead with a game in hand. So you're like, okay, they're still there with points percentage. Safe. It's fine. Yeah. Pittsburgh losing did not help. Like if Pittsburgh loses to Buffalo and you lose, Buffalo's ahead of you, and then on top of that, okay, Pittsburgh stays where they are. Boston has really gone stealth tank mode.
Oh yeah. I don't know. I mean, you can't call it stealth tank mode when you trade Brandon Carlo, Brad Marchand. Like,
yeah, I know.
When you do what they did at the deadline, that's not stealth.
Like that's about as far as I'm willing to take the Flyers moving up, because Anaheim still has 3 games in hand and are already 3 points ahead of you. Detroit's 5 ahead with 2 games. Columbus
those were teams that were in the playoff race until 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
That you could argue still kind of are, because Columbus has 12 games left.
That's fair.
Like,
and it's not going to happen, but I would love it if Columbus could make the run. Like, it seems like they've fallen off at this point.
Somebody's going to, you know what's going to happen though, truly? There's probably 5 teams. No, there's 5 teams that you could legitimately put in that last playoff spot, and all of them are fascinating.
Oh yeah, and they all lose to the Capitals in 5. Let's
Montreal and Columbus, for the sake of nobody saw that coming, probably. The Islanders for being the team that still
saw that coming.
Right, for still being the team that sold and possibly making it. The Rangers for being a dumpster fire for half the year and then making it.
Yeah, and if they get in, you still have Igor in the playoffs, so who knows?
Sure, and Detroit for being, for literally 2 weeks ago questioning the Yzer plan and then maybe making the playoffs anyway.
Yeah, if they don't make the playoffs, Yzerman's in trouble. But
yeah, I agree with that, by the way. But all I'm trying to get at is that, like, and I don't know, maybe that was a 1-game effect. Like Buffalo's playing better, they come out with more skill, they beat you.
Right.
I get the Flyers played a good game. I equally think Montreal just played brutal.
Absolutely. And you're always going to get that new coach bump, right? Like the boys are playing a little free.
Like I kind of like with crazy enough tie across the bench. I'm sitting there going, Marty's got to go full Tortorella in that locker room after the first period, because that was terrible.
Right.
The goalie looks like crap. The whole team didn't look like they were invested in that game at that point. You kind of need to lay down the law if you want to be the playoff team. You're in a playoff spot. That was one of your big chances to put some. Imagine if they get the 2 points. They're still 3 points up on a playoff spot.
Right.
Wow. Yep. Like Montreal.
Yeah, the East race is very tight.
Wouldn't that be such like? I know you're saying whoever it is probably losing to Washington, but wouldn't that be such a fun playoff series?
Absolutely. I mean, any of these borderline teams getting in, Montreal, New York, Columbus.
Do you know what lines up right now to be a fun playoff series? Should it hold anyway? There's no guarantees, obviously, but should it hold?
Are you talking about Senators, Leafs?
Toronto, Ottawa sounds great. Give it to me.
I can't wait to watch Steve Dangle scream about Brady Tkachuk for 2 weeks. Oh, it's going to be gorgeous.
Like I hate to say it, the most boring one that's out there at this point is we really got to watch Carolina, Jersey. Come on, we know who's winning that series.
Listen, because the Devils are.
Go ahead, finish your line.
Devils are frauds.
My line for the whole year is half the league sucks. Your line can be the Devils are frauds.
Mikko Rantanen might score 10 goals in that series.
Forget Mikko Rantanen. Well, no, not Mikko. Oh, Mikko Rantanen can't score 10.
No, not Mikko Rantanen. I'm sorry.
But a huge resurgence in Carolina, at least lately, for Taylor Hall, who was like a throw-in.
Well, it turns out he spent the last 5 years on bad teams.
Right. Still a good player.
Oh, he gets to play against the team he won the Hart Trophy with.
Let's go. This is that's good. I forgot about that part.
We're crawling closer to the playoffs.
We'll have a full-on playoff show before.
Yep. We have a real show coming next week. As mentioned, we play Buffalo on Saturday, Nashville on Monday, and then the Flyers don't play again until next Saturday. So we will put a show at some point in the middle there. In the meantime, make sure you're following us on social media. We're at YWT Podcast. Kevin is at Kevin_Durso, everywhere except Blue Sky, where it's just at Kevin Durso. Find the show everywhere you find your podcast, including sportstalkphilly.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit the like over there. We're really trying to grow that up. Other than that, the post John Tortorella era begins. Your daughter's already on her second new Flyers coach. And that'll be it.
Technically, by the assuming it's not Brad Shaw.
Assuming it's not Brad Shaw, she'll be on a third.
Exactly. Yep. I've done this before. I think I've told you this on the show before. Like, I've been doing it 11 seasons. Yep. Brad Shaw, technically. So I'll go into year 12, possibly with number 8 then, because this is 7. Wow. 7 different guys who have done press conferences.
Who was the head coach when you started covering?
Barui.
Okay.
Legitimately. I always tell the story. I always tell the story that in college I covered a game as an experience thing, and it was still during the Lavi era. Okay, you know what? That's partially not even true either, because when I started really going down to cover games, I was doing it on a rotation with other people, so I wasn't going to every game. I was doing it with other people. The start of that season was Lavi, and then Berube was in. Or no, I'm sorry. I didn't get the chance to go down that year. Okay. I think there was credentials involved, but I wasn't doing it yet with that at the time. And then, so my first year was Berube. And then, so I've done Berube, Hackstall, Gordon, AV, the brief period of Mike Yo, and then Torts, and now Bradshaw, which I would make the case for, well, AV at times wasn't always a soundbite, or a good conversation. Sometimes he had his moments, but
grumpy guy sometimes.
He could be when he wanted to be, but not near as frequent. Like, you didn't walk in going, "Who are we getting tonight?" You know what I mean? Every other one of them was great. Like, Mike Yo was great, Scott Gordon was great, Brad Shaw. Funny. Who did I bring up? The first 3 names I brought up. Oh, they're great. They're all the assistants. You know what I mean? Well, they're all the assistants.
I will go ahead and wager that the next head coach, whoever it is, David Carl, Rick Tocchet.
I mean, listen,
is not going to be quite as entertaining as John Tortorella.
Oh no, we're past that at this point. Yeah. We're past that level. We have
reached the peak.
I would love to get to know and experience what David Carl is like. Yeah. I'm certain that I could tap into anybody who's probably covered a minor league game to get an understanding of what Todd Nelson's like. I'm sure he's great though. I haven't really done a Tocchet press conference, to be honest, but not from a coaching perspective. Like, I think I was around when Tocchet got put into the Flyers Hall of Fame. So have I seen him in press conference mode? Yes, but that's for a ceremony. I've done a playoff series where Mike Sullivan was on the other side and attended those press conferences because they do them both in the same room. And he's not a problem. He doesn't, for a guy who's lockstep with Torts, he's not Torts. He doesn't give you that. He's fiery on the bench, but I don't think he gives you nothing in a press conference like that, or gives you those soundbite moments to a degree on a regular basis. He'd be perfectly fine from my perspective. I wonder about the fit as a coach more than anything, but
we will see. Obviously, we'll probably see over the summer.
I was going to say, the one thing I was going to tell you is you've got time. I don't think you're getting this. I don't think you're getting this immediately after April.
Yep, I think Danny and Bradshaw are going to let the kids have fun down the stretch here. They'll hire a new coach in the off season, and then
you're going to wait. You're going to wait to see who's available too. I mean, you're going to wait.
Got to see where the shuffle goes. Yep.
Yeah, and sure,
if Rick Tocchett's contract's got to expire, I'm sure they'll let that happen.
Well, unless it's one of those 2 outside the box candidates, you're going to let everything play out and do it the way that you have to do it, because it's going to be somebody who's already been around the block.
And speaking of letting things play out, we will let things play out over the next couple of days, and then we will be back with a new show. We don't have the exact date nailed down. We're still trying to, fit into Kevin's new fatherhood schedule here. So we will make it work. We will be back soon, and until then, we'll see you.